So I work at this NGO that's called Chequeado. We do fact-checking. Are you all more or less familiar with fact-checking? Yes? So like the normal fact-checking or the traditional fact-checking that has existed for more or less forever with journalism was a piece being fact-checked before it was published. So someone that was not the journalist would look through the piece and see all the information that could be fact-checked and fact-check that before it was published, so that it was published without mistakes. What started after the 2000s, and it started in the US and then spread to other countries and to Argentina in 2010 with Chequeado, is this specific kind of websites where what we do is fact-check what's said in the public debate. So we started fact-checking politicians, businessmen, union leaders, people who speak in this public debate and who were saying factual things that we could fact-check. And more or less in 2014, we started, so that's Chequeado in Spanish. So our idea is to raise the cost of lying so that it has a cost if you lie in the public debate, and to give people good information in a relevant and simple way so that they can make better decisions with that information. So that's kind of the general objective. And around 2014, we started seeing a rise in misinformation appearing in social media. So we started a special section back then that was to fact-check what was circulating in social media that is a bit different from fact-checking political candidates or businessmen or other people. And so what are we facing when we're talking about disinformation in social media? And there's a whole discussion about the word fake news and not using the word fake news. It's a very long discussion. If you're interested, we can get into it, but we'll just say disinformation or misinformation in most of the cases.
Can you try to speak a little slower?
Okay. So misinformation has always existed. As I said, we started in 2010 when there was not that much going on online and it was much more traditional. There's always been government propaganda. There's always been media who have published false information because they made a mistake, because they did it on purpose, because they had a hidden agenda. For many reasons, there's always been false information circulating in the public debate. That's not very new. But what is new is the advances in technology and the way the media landscape has changed in the last few years. And that is that the amount of information that can be created and how it can expand and be shared in a very fast way is very different from what happened before. And also that it expands a lot, especially when it appeals to your emotions. So it appeals to biases that you already have. So if you don't if you don't like a candidate, and they say that that candidate has said that he's going to kill all the animals in the city if he wins, it just goes to your deepest belief that you always knew that he was a bad person and that he was going to kill all the animals, and you want to share this to show the world that you were right about this person and that he's horrible, and that you have to show that you're in the opposite side. And so that kind of sharing of the information and expanding of the information is very new. Very new. It's already 4 or 5 years old. But it's newer than the misinformation in general, which is as old as information. So this is what we're facing. And what we managed to do with social networks, with social media, which is turn communication more horizontal, is a great thing. There's a lot of groups that did not have a voice before that, thanks to social media, now have a voice. If before you did not get through the filter of editors in traditional media, that perspective was not included in the global narrative. So now you have minorities, you have specific groups like ambientalists, how do you say that? Environmentalists, groups with a gender-specific agenda and perspective, and a lot of groups that before were not able to reach a massive audience can now do it without going through these traditional gatekeepers that would keep those perspectives a lot of the time outside because they would not consider them relevant. So it's a great thing that we've managed to have more voices on the public space, on the public sphere. With that comes the problem of misinformation. And there's several kinds of misinformation, and I think it's really important to understand where it comes from and what kind of content is being created to then be able to fight against it in an efficient way. And so this is something that First Drafted is an organization that's been working on misinformation for a long time. And it goes from satire that sometimes is out of context and can turn into misinformation, even though it was not intended to. There is fake information that's completely fabricated and has nothing to do with reality. There's things that are out of context. There's a lot of different ways of producing this information. And so a lot of what we see is a photograph of another country shown as if it happened yesterday in Argentina, or a video that's from a film shown as if it was something that had happened recently. And that kind of things that are out of context, that are not completely false. They did happen, just not here and now. And there's also very different motivations behind who creates and shares the misinformation. There are people that do it for money, and so they're looking for click bites, and they're looking to produce information that will generate clicks that will they'll give them money through the ads. And that's something that we can work with a lot with platforms, because that's where they get their money from. There are people that do it for political motivations, because they really believe in their candidate and they really believe the other candidate is evil, and they will invent things to try and combat, to try and make the situation worse for the other candidate. And then there's a lot of people that do it by ignorance, because they don't know. And so they just see something on the street and they make an association that's not true, and they tweet that, and it gets thousands and thousands of retweets when it's not really true, or they share something thinking it's true when it's not. And there's a big group of people that do this because of ignorance. And so we have to understand what are the different motivations of these people to try and see solutions for each kind of problem. And what we're doing in Chequeado, and what we think can be a way forward in this, there's no way that we're going to be able to fact check all the false information that's created. It's very quick, it's very easy to create something that has no basis at all. If I say that this candidate says that if he wins, he's going to kill all the animals in the city, for me to prove that he did not say that, I have to watch all the interviews he's ever given and everywhere he's ever talked to prove that he did not say that. Because I can call the candidate and ask him, and he'll say, no, of course I didn't. But maybe he did, and then he realized that it wasn't very popular, and so now he says he didn't. So I can't entirely dismiss the information just because the candidate says he didn't. But to fact check he didn't say it takes a lot of time. So there's no way as journalists we're going to be able to just fact check everything that comes out. We don't think that's a viable solution. We do think we do have to do journalism, and we do have to fact check specific claims that are false in order for them to have the widest reach possible, because one of our problems also is that the misinformation has a much wider reach and gets much more shares than what the fact check we do afterwards. So what we do think is we do journalism, we show specific things that are not true, we try to choose the most relevant and the most viral content. But also we think it's important because we show people how we do it so that anyone can do it afterwards. And we believe we have to be where people and where audiences are, and that is on WhatsApp, especially here. So we have our WhatsApp line, and people can send us information through WhatsApp without leaving the platform that they're used to using all the time. And we send them information back to WhatsApp so that they can share that with the groups where the disinformation was circulating. And we think it's important to respect the logic of how information circulates and not try to make people go your way, but try to put things where it'll be easy for them to see and read. We have our section on our website, and we're working with Facebook on their project of third-party fact-checking, which what it does is we flag things on their system that are not true with a link to our piece fact-checking it, which reduces the reach of the content, and it alerts people when they're going to share it. It says, are you sure you want to share this? Because it's not, Chequeado says it's not true. If you want to share it, that's your decision at the end. But at least it tells you before, and you do it knowing that you're sharing something that has been considered false. The other part that we think is very important is automatization, and that's our little bot. So this is Chequeabot. We've been working in developing this algorithm that helps us select fact-checkable phrases, because a big part of what we do in Chequeado is the first part is deciding what we're going to fact check. And that takes a long time because you have to listen to lots of interviews and you have to read a lot of the newspapers and see what's being said and how often it's being said and how important and how relevant it is. And so to make that process shorter, we have this bot that goes through all the transcripts of the Congress, and it goes through the president's speeches and through a lot of media, and especially provincial media that we don't necessarily have access to or we don't read regularly. So that tells you what's fact-checkable of what's being said. And we're also working on a system that transcribes interviews. So now if you have a link of a YouTube video, it has automatic subtitles. With our Checkabot, you can put the link and it transcribes it automatically, so it's much faster to watch an interview. So before you would have to sit and watch a 1-hour interview. Now you just put the link there and you have the whole transcription, and it actually tells you what's fact-checkable of that interview. That's the steps we're taking. There's a lot more to do in automatization, in identifying quickly when false information is starting to spread and catch it when it's still spreading and not when it's already gone absolutely viral. A lot of the misinformation circulates kind of cyclically. It starts once and then 2 years again, then 2 years after, the same thing will start circulating. It's the same in different countries, so there's a lot of things that are local, but there's a lot of things that are from other countries. And so we're working with our networks of fact-checkers in Latin America and in the world to have better ways of sharing information so that if it's already being debunked in Colombia, we don't have to do it again because it's already been debunked by fact-checkers in Colombia. And so there's still a lot of things that we need to be better at, but that's the direction we're working. That's one of them. And the other one is education. We believe that, as I said, we're not going to be able to fight this by ourselves. There's no way we can manage the amount of misinformation circulating, but we do believe that people become more and more aware that things that circulate on social media are not necessarily true. And there's a lot of skills in fact-checking and in journalism in general that are very useful for people. Not that everyone has to become a professional journalist because that would not be realistic, but there are a few techniques that are quite easy. And most importantly, beyond the kind of technical things, there is a certain skeptical approach to information that's very useful if we can transmit that to people and for people to understand what a source means and what's a source you can trust and what's a source you cannot trust. And we do have to be very careful not to generate an atmosphere where we just distrust everything and we can't trust anything, because that's not what we want. We don't want cynicism, but we do want some healthy skepticism. And we're working on the tools to try and teach these. And I separate kind of journalism, innovation, and education, but they really go all together because we also have to innovate in the way we're educating about this kind of things. And so the last thing, we're also experimenting in the formats. So we're working with GIFs, we're working with going on the streets and showing enormous games so that people will interact with us on the streets, and it's not just for the population that's online and that's already quite informed. And we're trying with different things to see which works better and what can help us be more effective with our message once we actually publish fact checks. So that's more or less our idea. It's doing journalism, teaching people some of the techniques of journalism, working on education and critical thinking, and trying to incorporate automatization so that it's faster and easier to identify and debunk things. Thank you.